beside them as they came out of the deep water. If they were not, then they probably suffocated on the decks of the ship or in the holds of the ship after they were hauled up. There aren't really procedures for humane fishing. Now, sorry, humane killing of fish. Now, as far as fish farming is concerned, some people think that this is the answer to the sustainability problem. But it's really not, although it's true that, say, Atlantic salmon became not quite commercially extinct, but very much commercially endangered. So most of the salmon sold is now farmed, certainly the Atlantic salmon. But while it's true that you can breed the salmon, you have to feed them something. So salmon are a carnivorous fish. So it's the same kind of problem that I talked about with cattle in the feedlots. Not quite as bad, but you have to collect 2 pounds of fish for every pound of salmon that you get. Which commercially is okay because you can get these cheap fish and you just sort of mash them up together and feed them to the salmon in pellets. But it still means that fishing fleets are out there scouring the ocean for these cheap fish, and that's doing immense damage to the oceans. Other areas of fishery, like the shrimp fishery, is notorious for the amount of bycatch that it gets. Bycatch is fish that are not commercially wanted. So there are these trawlers that go out specifically fishing for shrimp, and they do it by trawling the bottom of the ocean. And for every pound of shrimp that they catch, there's 9 tons of fish that they throw out, and that fish dies. I mean, it's been trawled up, pulled up in the net, hauled onto the deck, and then they sort out and throw it out. But by the time it gets back in the water, it's usually dead. So there's a huge amount of waste of marine life in that as well. So, although you could say some fishing is not as bad as intensive farming, it's still not a good story. Right, let's go over this side, in the red up the back, yeah.
I wanted to address what we owe the species that we have domesticated over time. If we stop eating meat for a certain reason, we will not be producing meat at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really treating them the way they're treated right now, but on the other hand, if they were to become extinct, it seems like a contract has been violated. So I wonder if you could address that issue.
Yeah.
I have a secondary question too about deer. And
You have the same problem with deer here that we have in Princeton? Are they
well, yes,
overpopulating?
They're bovines too. We have, what responsibility do we have as a culture not to cultivate them? In Pennsylvania is very good at cultivating.
Are you talking about actually cultivating, actually farming them rather than deer hunting?
They are in a way they're farming.
In Princeton, I get questions about hunting them because people don't like deer. They come and eat their gardens, and
Right.
they can be a menace when you're driving at night.
County here, but then
Yeah. Okay.
the question is, they are also bovines, and we have what's our relationship with deer?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a few questions here. Firstly, of course, you're right that if we didn't farm the domestic species, they wouldn't be there, or at least they wouldn't be that much there. So you're ahead of one question I got once when I gave a talk when I talked to father. I think probably there would only be very few because we don't let species become completely extinct. And I guess an example here would be the draft horse, right? The draft horse, there used to be lots of draft horses because we used them for pulling loads. Then we developed the internal combustion engine. We no longer use draft horses for pulling loads, but they're not quite extinct. There are a small number that draft horse fanciers keep going, the Clydesdales and various other breeds, and probably the same things would happen with cattle and pigs and the other domestic animals if we stopped rearing them. So I think that's an acceptable alternative, keeping some of them alive in reasonable conditions on reserves where they can live out their natural life, and we don't inflict suffering on them as we do now, and we don't have the numbers that make the contribution to climate change that they make now. I suppose you could argue, this is what I talk about like the conscientious omnivore, that with species that are not producing a large amount of greenhouse gases, so with non-ruminant animals, we could, in a way, give them good lives and still use them for food. That's a possible argument, and maybe you refer to this idea of the contract with domestic animals, which some people talk about. That I don't really think speaking of a contract is very helpful, because you can really only have a contract where there's consent from both parties, and obviously the animals are not consenting. But you could give them good lives, you could painlessly kill them, you could do that in a way that was sustainable with some of these species. You know, personally I wouldn't be eating them. I guess I've not eaten animals for more than 30 years now, and I don't really see any reason to start again. But if somebody did that, you know, I would think that was a choice that they had made, and that would be the kind of conscientious, honourable position that I think I could live with, even if it wouldn't be my choice. Then you asked about deer. Well, I suppose some of the same, you know, if you're talking about farming deer, I actually haven't seen any figures on the amount of greenhouse gas that deer produce. So I imagine that they're not as bad as cattle, and probably not as bad as sheep either. But again, I would say if they were living good lives in reasonably natural conditions in a sort of social group, that would be in the same status as doing the same with other domestic animals. And certainly I think there is a problem where we remove predators from wild animals, just to say something about the question that I often do get asked. I think we have to do something to control populations of animals when we've removed the predators. Otherwise they're just going to die unpleasant deaths when food runs out. So I think ideally maybe we would develop methods of sterilisation or contraception for animals in that situation. But in the meantime, if somebody says, look, you know, I hunt, I'm an accurate shot, I'm confident in my ability to kill a deer instantly, and then I eat the venison, you know, that seems to me to be far better than somebody who walks down to the local supermarket and picks up a chicken without asking what sort of life the chicken had. A lot of people get more emotionally upset about hunting than they do about eating chicken and pigs. I think it should be the other way around. Again, it isn't something that I would do. I would rather leave the deer there. You know, it's true that if I really knew it was going to starve to death when winter came, I would probably think it's better to shoot it than to let it starve to death. That's the kind of euthanasia that I would support. But normally I would say, you know, I wouldn't really want to do that, but I could see that as a defensible option. Okay, let's take someone in the middle now, gentleman there.
Me? Yeah. Given your concerns with livestock and climate change, I'm wondering what you think are alternatives for the millions of people in pastoralist societies in developing countries, and then can you link a little bit your philosophy on aid and development assistance to what you talked about today?
Yeah. Look, what I was talking about today is intended for an audience that can walk into a supermarket and choose whether to buy the beef or the chicken or the beans or the tofu or the Boca burger or whatever, a wide range of products. And those are the situations in which I think the ethical case for vegetarian or vegan diets is very strong. It's completely different if you're living in a developing country, in a pastoral area where you graze animals, where you don't have a lot of options, and if you eliminated the meat or milk or eggs from your diet, you would have trouble getting an adequately nourishing diet for yourself or your children. So I am not saying that there is anything unethical about eating animals in those circumstances. I think that's really a different kind of question. We should provide people with options where we can, but where effectively there aren't options, I think it's you know, no one can tell somebody else not to get what they need to nourish their family. How does this fit with what I say about our obligations to do something about world poverty? Well, I think the critique of factory farming fits extremely well, really dovetails properly for the reasons that I was giving. If we got rid of factory farming, we would have less stress on our planet, fewer greenhouse gas emissions,